So in our previous tutorial, we set up Docker on our Ubuntu server, our DigitalOcean droplet, but we didn't actually get around to installing the MongoDB database. So in this tutorial, we're going to log back onto the server and create a new MongoDB Docker container that will be used for our project to hold all of the information that the API generates and reads. So let's log on. Let's log on as the rickandroll user this time. So all being well, we should have access to Docker from the previous tutorial, and because we installed it globally as root, it should be available to this user as well. So let's go ahead and set up our Docker container for MongoDB. So we'll say Docker run, and then we'll run it in detached mode. We don't want an interactive mode this time. We'll set the ports up. So if you remember, when we set this up locally, we can specify our own custom mapping of ports. So we'll set it up to be the same as our local machine, although if you were adding more containers on the server, then you could choose a different port number here. And we're mapping that to the standard Docker port, the standard MongoDB port, which is 27017. So that'll be the 27018 is the port that we'll need to use within our connection string. So the name for the container in Docker will be rickandroll, just keep it simple. And then we're going to pass in a few environment variables. And the first is this Mongo initdb root username. And we'll set that equal to rickandroll again. And then there's another environment variable, which is Mongo initdb root password. Don't worry about copying this down. I'll put a link or something in the description just so that you can copy and paste this full command if you need to. And I just noticed there's a bit of an error there. So Mongo initdb root password. And obviously we're going to put the password for the MongoDB database in here. And because we're on a production system, let's make this a little bit more secure rather than just putting in a placeholder password. So if you go over to a secure password generator site and let's generate a new password, I think I will remove the symbols from this one just because I think that can cause some problems with the MongoDB setup. So let's just copy that password that's been generated. Final thing that we provide to the docker run command is just the name of the image. So this case it's going to be Mongo, which will install the MongoDB server for us. So let's go ahead and run that. Just enter our password for rickandroll. And so you can see here that it can't find the image for Mongo latest. So what Docker is doing is going out to the Docker hub and pulling all of the necessary container components that are required to set up Docker. So I think we missed this in the previous step because I already had Docker on my local machine. So here's just an example of how Docker goes and gets those different containers and then installs everything to get the server and the container up and running. So there you go, that's completed and we've got a new Docker container set up for our database under MongoDB. One thing before you leave this terminal, make sure you copy your username and password so that you've got those for later. Otherwise you need to go through the process of resetting them. And obviously you'll need those for the connection string at some point as well when we configure the environment for the production server to run. But just as a wrap up here, you can find that the Docker container is running now. So if you say docker ps, we'll need sudo for that. So sudo docker ps, and you can see this is the container we've just set up. It's been up for about a minute, and obviously it's got the right ports pointing for us, and it's got the name of rickandroll. So there you go, there's our container set up and ready to go for our database for our production system. But that's it for this tutorial. Make sure you stay tuned for more web dev tips.